The NHL free agent market has now been open for well over 24 hours. Yesterday was very hectic. There were so many things going on at once. But now, since things have really died down and I've had a lot of time to really sit back and collect my thoughts and digest everything that's happened in the NHL over the last couple of days, I figured now would be a good time to give you guys my biggest winners and losers from free agency so far. As always, I want to know what you guys are thinking, so be sure to let me know what your list of the biggest winners and losers would look like down below in the comments. And with that all being said, let's go ahead and start the video off with a team that I think is one of the winners of free agency, the Chicago Blackhawks. In my opinion, the Blackhawks have done a really good job of putting a much more competitive team around Connor Bedard while also maintaining their cap flexibility for the future. They didn't go out and overcommit to anybody and overpay guys on 6 and 7 year deals. The longest contract the Blackhawks have given out so far in free agency is a 4-year deal, which was given to Tyler Bertuzzi, a deal that has a cap hit of $5.5 million a season, which I think is very reasonable for Bertuzzi. They also brought back Teuvo Teravainen on a 3-year deal, a player that can help them in all situations, added some depth to the blue line, signing guys like TJ Brody and Alec Martinez, players that should really provide a nice veteran presence on their blue line, and also provide some internal competition. I know Blackhawks fans are wanting young guys like Wyatt Kaiser and Ethan Del Mastro to get a look in the NHL next season, and if that's going to happen, those two guys are really going to have to earn one of those spots and outplay some veterans in training camp in the preseason, because after signing Martinez and Brody, the Blackhawks now already have 6 NHL defensemen signed through next season. The blue line is looking pretty crowded. Should be a really competitive training camp, which I believe is a good thing. Moving on now to a team that I believe is one of the losers of free agency so far, the Vegas Golden Knights. Obviously, Vegas is very tight to the cap and didn't have a whole lot of flexibility to do much heading into free agency, but they're a team that we've seen in recent years get pretty creative in terms of how they work around the salary cap, and that's just something we haven't seen so far this offseason. They lost their leading goal scorer in Jonathan Marchessault, who signed with the Nashville Predators, and after signing with Nashville, Marchessault came out and said that he doesn't really think Vegas made a serious effort to keep him around. They also lost some key depth pieces with Michael Amadio and William Carrier leaving. It seems like Vegas is really banking on a guy like Alexander Holtz to break out and someone like Victor Olofsson to bounce back and get back to being a 25 to 30 goal scorer to replace some of the offense they lost. I'm a little bit confused by the Ilya Samsonov signing as well. They brought him in on a 1-year deal worth $1.8 million. Don't really understand the thought process of trading away Logan Thompson and then signing Samsonov to this deal. Logan Thompson is around $1 million cheaper than Samsonov and was much better than him this past season. Moving on now to another team that I believe is one of the biggest winners of free agency so far. This is kind of an obvious one, the Nashville Predators. Nashville had a ton of cap space heading into free agency, and Barry Trotz was definitely not shy about spending it. The Predators really splurged, bringing in guys like Steven Stamkos, Brady Shea, and Jonathan Marchessault, and re-signing Alexander Carrier. Is there some risk involved with these contracts? 1000%. I think the Stamkos and Brady Shea ones especially, but there is no doubt that the Nashville Predators are a vastly improved team from the end of the season when they were eliminated by the Vancouver Canucks in the playoffs to now. The direction Nashville has chose to head in is to build off of their playoff berth from this past season, a season in which they largely overachieved based off of the expectations most people had for them. The Predators have now set themselves up to be very competitive in the Western Conference over these next 4 or 5 years, while they still have guys like Roman Josi and Philip Forsberg in their primes playing like superstars. And I definitely respect the aggressiveness and how Barry Trotz wasn't just going to be content with Nashville being a mediocre team that can, squeak into the playoffs but likely get bounced in the first round. I think 4 or 5 years from now, Nashville is probably headed for a pretty lengthy rebuild, but until then, this is a team that should be very good. Next up, another team that I have as one of the biggest losers of free agency so far, the Detroit Red Wings. To be honest, I didn't really expect Detroit to be all that aggressive in free agency this year. Sure, they have over $21.5 million in cap space, but you still need to sign guys like Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider, who are going to eat up a large chunk of that cap space. So you have to imagine it's pretty difficult to be all that active in free agency when you really don't know how much cap space you're going to have after those two guys get signed. Bringing back Patrick Kane is massive, and I like the Eric Gustafsson signing as well. He should replace a lot of what Detroit lost with Shane Gostisbehere leaving. Outside of those two signings though, not really a whole lot going on. Looking at the Red Wings roster on paper right now, I have a hard time believing that they'll not only be able to take a step next season, but even be able to replicate their success from this season. It seems like in order for the Red Wings to take that next step, they are really banking on prospects to come in and have a big impact for them next season. Guys like Marco Kasper, Carter Mazer, maybe Nate Danielson, Albert Johansson, Simon Edvinsson. I am still expecting Steve Yzerman to be pretty active in the trade market. After signing Cam Talbot and Jack Campbell, you have to imagine there's going to be a move involving a goaltender. Yzerman has already came out and said that he doesn't envision Detroit carrying 3 goaltenders in the NHL like they did this past season, so assuming it's Jack Campbell and Sebastian Cossa as the tandem in Grand Rapids, that leaves Alex Lyon, Cam Talbot, and Ville Husso in the NHL. Someone's going to be the odd man out. The blue line is still pretty crowded as well, so I wouldn't be surprised to see a trade or two involving a defenseman at some point this summer. We obviously still have a long way to go before October rolls around, but I'm definitely not a big fan of the offseason the Red Wings have had so far. Moving on now to another team that I have as one of the biggest winners of free agency so far. This may be a bit of a hot take, but I have the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, yes, they did lose quite a bit with guys like Brady Shea and Brett Pesce signing in Nashville and New Jersey respectively, and obviously the big one, Jake Gensel, leaving to sign with Tampa Bay. But in my opinion, Carolina has done a fantastic job so far of replenishing the roster while also maintaining their cap flexibility. They signed some fantastic value deals, signing guys like Sean Walker and Shane Gostisbehere for a combined cap hit of just $6.8 million is some fantastic work. Those two guys were two of the better puck-moving defensemen on the free agent market. They like to play aggressive, get involved in the rush, pinch in the offensive zone. I think they're both going to fit Carolina's style of play very well, and for any defensive deficiencies that either of them have, Carolina's fantastic team defense should be able to insulate that. I like the William Carrier signing as well. He is a very solid, well-rounded bottom six winger, one of the best forecheckers in the NHL. I feel like 6 years for a fourth liner is a little bit much, but you have to imagine Carolina probably decided to go with long-term low cap hit as opposed to shorter term with a higher cap hit. I definitely think they could still use a top six forward. Part of me wonders now with Jake Gensel leaving, could they circle back and try to make things work with Martin Necas, or is the plan still to trade him? I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the rest of Carolina's offseason plays out. Next up, another team that I have as one of the biggest losers of free agency so far, we have the Dallas Stars. If it weren't for the fact that Dallas once again signed Matt Duchene to a fantastic deal, just like they did last offseason, 1 year, $3 million, then I think Dallas would clearly be looked at as the biggest loser of free agency so far. Surprised to see Duchene sign another 1 year, $3 million deal. Does Jim Nill have some dirt on him or something, or does Matt Duchene just really love playing in Dallas? That's fantastic value once again. But outside of the Duchene signing, some real head-scratching moves so far for Dallas in my opinion. The two big ones, Matt Duchene signing a 2-year deal with a cap hit of $3.75 million per season, and also Ilya Lyubushkin signing a 2-year deal with a cap hit of $3.25 million per season. If you were to tell me before free agency started that a team would be able to sign Shane Gostisbehere and Sean Walker for a combined cap hit that's lower than what a team would sign Ilya Lyubushkin and Matt Dunn before, I would have said you're absolutely out of your mind. But that is exactly what has happened. I really don't understand the decision to buy out somebody like Ryan Suter, who only had 1 year left on his contract at a cap hit of $3.65 million, just to go out and sign Matt Dumba to a deal with a higher cap hit. I get Matt Dumba's younger, but he was absolutely atrocious this season for Arizona and Tampa Bay. Going from guys like Chris Tanev and Ryan Suter to Matt Dumba, Ilya Lyubushkin, and Brendan Smith, in my eyes, is a significant downgrade for Dallas. Moving on now to the next team that I have as one of the winners of free agency so far, the New Jersey Devils, who didn't do a lot, but the moves they did make, I'm a pretty big fan of. This is a team that kind of struggled defensively and definitely didn't get bailed out by their goaltending this past season, so signing guys like Brett Pesce and Brendan Dillon, along with already trading for Jacob Markstrom, should definitely help them. I feel like $4 million a season is a little bit rich for Brendan Dillon, who likely slots in on their third pairing, but I like the fit of him in New Jersey. He's a physical shutdown guy. I like the Stefan Nason signing as well, who is a very useful bottom six forward, great forechecker, and actually carved himself out a nice role for Carolina playing the net front position on the power play over the last few seasons. Continuing on now, next up, another team that I think is one of the biggest losers of free agency, the Los Angeles Kings, who haven't done a whole lot so far. They still have over $10 million in projected cap space. I actually am a pretty big fan of the Warren Fogle signing. I think he should be a really useful player for them, but the Joel Edmondson deal, that is an absolute head scratcher. In my opinion, that is one of the worst contracts that have been signed in free agency so far. Joel Edmondson is a replacement level defenseman. He's very physical, but outside of that, doesn't bring much to the table at all. This is a very similar deal to when Columbus signed Erica Branson to a 4-year deal with a cap hit of $4 million per season a couple years ago, and then going out and signing Joel Edmondson to a contract like this. I think it's safe to say the LA Kings blue line took a pretty big hit so far this offseason. This is a team that's trying to get over the hump. They've lost to the Edmonton Oilers in the playoffs 3 years in a row, and the Kings really haven't done anything to move the needle all that much, if at all, and close close the gap between themselves and a team like the Edmonton Oilers. If anything, I think that gap is much larger now, because unlike the LA Kings, I think the Edmonton Oilers have had a fantastic free agency so far, and I guess we'll talk about the Oilers now, who are the last team on my list of winners. The Oilers really didn't have a whole lot of cap flexibility heading into free agency, but man, I really believe they did an absolutely fantastic job so far based off of the situation they were in. They were able to bring back key depth pieces of the forward group, signing guys like Adam Henrique, Janmark, Perry, and Connor Brown, all to extensions, and I think all for reasonable prices. And they also brought in guys like Victor Arvidsson and Jeff Skinner to come in and bolster the middle six and provide some secondary scoring. Both low risk, high reward moves. Obviously, there's concerns about Victor Arvidsson's health, but when healthy, this is a guy who can get you 25 goals in a season. And when it comes to Jeff Skinner, sure, at $8 million, he was definitely overpaid, but he's not a bad player. He's another guy who, like Victor Arvidsson, can get you 25 goals in a season. Signing those two guys for a combined cap hit of $7 million, I think is fantastic work by the Oilers. I said it in my free agency review yesterday, and I'll say it again here. I wouldn't be surprised to see those two guys combine for 50 goals next season if they're both healthy. On paper, the Oilers forward group looks absolutely nasty. I definitely think this is a team that should be looked at as a serious threat to come out of the Western Conference again next season. And now finally, finishing out the video with the last team on my list of losers from free agency so far, we have the Buffalo Sabres, a team that had a ton of cap space heading into free agency and still do, almost $19 million, but they weren't able to land any of the big name players available on the market. I don't hate the Jason Zucker signing. $5 million is a little bit rich, but only being a one-year deal, it's not really going to become a problem for them. Jason Zucker should replace a little bit of the offense they lost after buying out Jeff Skinner. Aside from the Jason Zucker signing, though, they really didn't do a whole lot with the exception of a couple of depth moves. Nothing that's going to move the needle. Nothing that inspires confidence in the fact that they're going to be able to take the next step next season. They're similar to Detroit in the sense that, looking at their roster right now, I have a really hard time believing they're going to be able to take that next step and pass over a team like Florida, Boston, Toronto, or Tampa Bay in that Atlantic division. So that is going to wrap up today's video. Those were, in my opinion, the biggest winners and losers from free agency so far. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I always want to know what you guys are thinking, so be sure to let me know what your list would look like down below in the comments. If you made it all the way to the end of the video and you ended up enjoying yourself, please remember to leave the video a like. That is definitely the best way to let me know that you enjoyed, and it does help out the videos a ton. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all year round, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you all again soon.